I painted this sketch, a rough idea, capturing the mood, the lighting and composition, and then turn it into the atmospheric artwork using Blender. It's simple enough landscape if you analyze the scene without paying attention to details. But details are exactly what I want to talk about today, because details allowed me create a high level of realism and create this artwork. From the very beginning I focused on shaping the environment, the foundation of entire scene. Using Blender sculpting tools, I covered up the swamp terrain, defined the flow of water and muddy banks, and the central island where the village would take shape. All main objects in this scene were created from scratch, including houses, a tree around which was built a small village on the swamp, and all other details. Everything was started from a blank canvas. And if you wanna dive into the full tutorial of this artwork, I made an absolutely detailed guide. It covers everything step by step, from sculpting and modeling to lighting and post-production. It's split into 3 big parts, totaling 9 hours, and you can find the full tutorial on my Patreon, link in the description. But I wanna talk about key moments of how I turned my sketch into realistic artwork in Blender. I have said many times on my channel that realism is in the details, and this scene shows very clearly. The main story is a swamp, a natural environment for dirt and clear materials, as such scene will not give realism. So almost every material is a combination of textures and various maps of dirt, cracks, scuffs and everything that helps to make the material looks dirty like natural materials relates to such location. In some materials I use several different maps to make the materials more natural, mixing everything and experimenting with blending mode in mix color node, which also can bring different effects. I used a lot of ambient occlusion map. I would say it's almost the basic map for working with textures and materials in any project that is better not to ignore, especially in such scenes. It's used to add dirt and moss, sometimes even like a mask, to mix two different materials to get the natural material. Some kind of like you have some the original material on the object and some other layer with another material under this base one, and due to the environment circumstances and time of erosion, this material will be a little bit visible to the base surface. Also, using geometry node in the shader editor and normal data from this node, we can additionally add some necessary dirt or moss to all objects using separate XYZ to add this additional natural effect on the top part of surfaces. We will get such an effect, but in some project it may be like dust on some abandoned locations. You can use the same way to do that in your scene to achieve realistic materials. So using this information from geometry, we can add to the object this effect only on top parts, which corresponds to z-axis or other axes, of course depending on what you're doing. But in this scene I use this trick almost everywhere. Wooden planks, roofs and these parts of bridges also have the same effect using information of the normal data from the object. As I have said many times, in nature there are no pure surface and materials. You cannot just take texture and get realism. You need to work on the material, find references and try to recreate in your artwork, but constantly complicate the material. It makes it look like a real scene, not just a texture. Even if the texture itself already looks cool, adding additional effects allow us to embed of this material into the creating environment. What is also really important, this is not only makes the material as realistic as possible, but also creates the uniformity of the scene, that all these objects are in one environment, not turnout of different scenes and just thrown into the one with lighting. By the way, speaking about lighting, since I had been doing this art by getting order following my sketch, It was important, and in general that's why we need to make sketch to find composition, color and light. And already when I jumped into 3D in Blender, I just walk following the concept and not longer waste much time on experimenting with the same things like composition and light. Well, to get the same atmosphere as on my sketch, I used volume light. Who follows my creativity knows that the main tool I use to create the atmosphere is volume. I love volume and I use it almost in my every artwork. In this art I used volume for the global atmosphere combined with the regular HDRI map. Basically, the light system here was built on global map and volume, because I also added emission for this volume. So that's how simple volume turns a simple scene into an atmospheric art. Also, in the final stages of the art I added local effects such as a toxic fog coming from certain parts of the swamp, using volume but adding noise texture to make it not uniform effect of mist or poison evaporation from the swamp. Not too much, it didn't cover the main scene and even added more emphasizes of this island on the swamp. And of course, one of the main and important objects in the scene is big tree around which this whole village on the swamp is built. And finding a solution for this modeling, of course using Blender, was one of the key questions for me, because I don't really want to use some kind of external software just one tree and prefer working in Blender. I already showed in one of my masterclass the way of modeling a tree using skin modifier, an old but still effective way when we need to make a specific tree for the project, because I doubt it's really possible to find some trees somewhere in model libraries, but it was important for me to follow the idea on the sketch. I could even use the skin modifier without any add-ons, but it would be difficult to achieve such detailed small branches on the tree. Anyway, I found a tree add-on on Blender Market which works on geometry nodes in Blender and allowed me to create tree of almost any shape. I would say very necessary add-on, and you don't need to use external programs, although it was a bit complicated, because to achieve roughly similar shape of the tree from my sketch, I spent enough time experimenting with the overall shape, local small details and leaves, that on one hand it looks massive, and on the other one there was not really like a dark spot on the art, that some light would passing through the branches on the tree, adding more atmosphere to the picture and looks realistic. By the way, this tree is for the foreground. I also did the same using the AnyTree add-on, but since this is a foreground, it was necessary to increase the detail of object considerably. And couple words of optimization. I already talked about it. We can use the golden rule of air perspective. The further the object from the camera, the less details of the mesh and the texture can be used, and use high poly model only for the foreground. It seems obvious, but it's frequent questions that I asked how I work with big scenes in Blender. Optimization, my friends. And optimization, it means not just to reduce the quality of the texture or model, but to do it logically, following the logic of the project. I have a video on my channel about optimization and working with big scenes in Blender, watch if you missed it. But to make a beautiful greenery in the scene, I used another cool add-on, Secret Paint add-on. It's a free and literally allows us to draw around the scene using grass or vegetation as an object. I would say the distinctive feature of this add-on is opportunity to do it more in a creative way. Literally growing vegetation in the scene. Using brushes we can not only draw a spread vegetation but also cut it, making it lower or higher in the place that we need. It's a great way to work with large amount of vegetation, as it also allows us to optimize this for the viewport in Blender. However, for some of the herbs in the scene I use Just Cutter. While Secret Paint also allows us to work with large areas and optimize the scene, Geoscatter still has more settings for this, and I think it's fit better at least for grass on the swamp. So I made this grass on the swamp using it and the vertex groups. But in this case we need a large density of the grid, because with low density of vertices it's difficult to control exactly where we need to place this grass, as we can do it in the Secret Paint add-on, for instance. As I said, we can also use optimization by adding more density for the vegetation in the foreground and reduce the density as it moves far from the camera. For example, for the long shot, grass density may be minimal or even replaced with texture, considering that this also will be covered by fog and detail visibility is minimal. It's better to spend valuable resources of video card on detailing the foreground and maybe middle ground, since there are still more visible details. Overall, this scene came quite heavy and optimization was one of the problems. The final Blender scene in place with texture weighs more than 4.5 GB, which basically takes the leading position among my projects, taking somewhere the second or third place. I had a project where the final scene weighed 7.2 GB with textures. Considering that it's only for the one camera in the scene, it's quite heavy enough. The rendering time, given that there are many details and fog is scattering all over the scene and in some places even more, also affected the time of the rendering, about 40 minutes on my RTX 3060, which may be not so much, but usually I don't spend more than 10 minutes for the frame in 4 or 5K. So yeah, this project has made me think a little bit about upgrading my computer. If you wanna test the scene, follow my Patreon, there I posted the scene as well as the whole tutorial, and this is 9 hours, as I said, of detailed material on creating this art from scratch in Blender. All links in the description to this video. Actually, this is such a small process of turning my sketch into art using Blender. If you are interested, hit the like button to this video and do not forget subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. And if you want to support my channel even further than YouTube, welcome to my Patreon, all links in the description.